the importance of leadership and significance of leadership in Islam, and it's supposed to continue on to Friday night program. But given the nature of the recent current events that have occurred surrounding Breonna Taylor and the rest of the racial inequality, acts that we have seen in the past few months, I think it was fitting for that topic to change during the khutbah. But I would like to continue this leadership topic in the Friday night program. Now, first and foremost, the reason why I chose to discuss leadership in Islam is really because we are dawning on a time in American history where true leadership is very important. And as Muslims, I think we can draw from sources like the Quran and the Sunnah to really understand what it is that is leadership. What is leadership a function of? What does it contain? Why is it useful? And why is it necessary? And inshallah, I'll tie that to Dhul Qarnayn and his story. But before, just to set some exposition to this topic, Muslims and Muslimas, we play a leadership role to some degree or another, right? In some capacity or another. If you're a president of a masjid, for example, you for sure are a leader to some capacity because you are in charge of the masjid directives, and the programs of the masjid, the operations of the masjid, and at the end of the day, people are going to look up to you in regards to how a masjid is ran, and how the funds donated to that masjid are allocated. I just ask if you have your mic on, if you can please just mute yourself, inshallah, just so we can make sure that everybody can hear, inshallah. So you can be a leadership, you can be a president at a masjid, for example. You could be a president of an organization. You can be a team leader, a project manager at work. All of these functions have an essence of leadership in which you will often be mandated to delegate tasks to people, and other people will be accountable to you in regards to fulfilling those tasks. Now, a lot of people may think, well, I'm not a project manager, I'm not a boss, I'm not, the president of a masjid or anything of that. So am I still a leader? And the answer is yes. Even if you look in your family dynamics, for example, if you are a husband or the leader of a household, you are a leader. And at the end of the days, I mean, the burden of the household is put on your shoulders. And if you're a young man going through school, well, perhaps you're a leader on a sports team, or you're a leader if you have a little brother or a little sister. So each one of us, to some capacity, I guarantee you, if you think long and hard, even if you think you're not a leader to some capacity, you are a leader, and some things are going to be expected of you in that capacity. Now, what is the current definition of a leader? Unfortunately, the politics in America don't allow us to truly understand what a leader is. We live in a time where, there is much polarization between parties, which is undoubtedly rooted from mass funds raised by, big money campaigns for political candidates to get elected, and once they do get elected, to remember those who elected them, remember those who got them in office. And essentially, the ones who donate most to their campaigns are the ones that they're going to serve. So a leader, when in a raw context, in a context of Islam, is somebody who serves the needs for the people and is a follower as much as they are a leader, because they work with the people to achieve a goal. There is a cooperative effort. But unfortunately, the leadership that we see today, especially in American politics, especially with these elections coming up, unfortunately, a lot of the times, and to stay as apolitical as possible, but a lot of the times this leadership is demonstrated in the wrong way. And many of us can gauge an incorrect form of what leadership is. Now, this brings us to the time where we ask ourselves, okay, well, if we don't see great examples of leaders in society, and we want to be a leader in our life, and to some capacity, we have to be a leader within whatever role we are in our lives. where do we look to? You know, where do we draw this principle from? And the first place, as in anything that we do in our life, we must look at the life of the Prophet ﷺ. We must look at the Quran. And it is amazing because the Prophet ﷺ is unanimously agreed upon by many historians who aren't even Muslim, that he was a leader, a pioneer of a holistic leader of his time. What do I mean by holistic leader? He was not only a spiritual leader, he was a leader in finance, he was a leader in the battlefield, he was a leader in his marriage. Every aspect of his life demonstrated leadership quality. One quick scenario that comes up to my mind is when the Prophet ﷺ and the companions were retreating, or not retreating, but they were coming back from the signed deal, the Treaty of Hudaybiyah. And, you know, the Quraysh, when they asked him to sign the treaty, you know, many conditions, you know, were in this treaty, and many of them were, you know, biased towards the Quraysh and in favor of the Quraysh. However, it allowed the Muslims to visit Mecca in the near future. And so the Prophet ﷺ went ahead and signed this document, and he asked, you know, one of his companions to show him where to sign. And the Quraysh, they made him scribe out that he was the messenger of God. And, you know, his companions would not do that. They would not utter that fact. They would not be held responsible for scribing out on a piece of parchment or canvas paper or papaya paper, whatever they wrote on that the Prophet ﷺ was not the messenger of God. But Prophet Muhammad ﷺ understood that there was a bigger picture here, that he needed to concede in some areas for the benefit of the ummah. And so he went ahead and scribed out you know, that title. But one struck me as particular was that the Prophet ﷺ, on his way back with the companions as they're returning to Medina, you know, if a leader in any society today were to make a promise to his people, and that promise wasn't exactly fulfilled in the way that the people thought, then you would see a high level of mutiny. You would see a high level of disobeying from the people. They would turn against that leader because that leader did not fulfill what was expected, right? What they thought. But you'll notice that as the companions and the Prophet ﷺ were heading back to Medina, not one person said anything bad about the Prophet ﷺ. Not one person said that, you know, the Prophet ﷺ did not gain us the promise that we had asked for. And that is a very crucial aspect, because what that shows is that the Sahaba and the followers of the Prophet ﷺ, the early pioneers of Islam, they had full trust in the Prophet ﷺ that whatever he was divinely inspired by Allah through was inevitably going to happen. And even though it didn't happen today, it would happen eventually. So this is just an example from the Prophet ﷺ's life. But one amazing example that I think is truly significant and truly, you know, brings out the qualities of a leader and emulates those qualities is the story of Dhul Qarnayn. So many of us are familiar with this story, but you know, there are some lessons that can be gained. So what exactly how did this story come about? Well, in Surah Al-Kahf, one of the stories listed in Surah Al-Kahf is the story of Dhul Qarnayn. And the Jews of Mecca, they were asked by the Quraysh to shed some light on the legitimacy of prophethood by answering a few questions. Among them being asking the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ about a ruler who spanned the entire globe. Somebody who, you know, knew the entire globe. The Jewish tribes, they knew that if the Prophet ﷺ had the answer to this question, then perhaps there was some legitimacy to his claim. And it just so happened that the Prophet ﷺ did not receive the answer to this question for a while, until Jibreel alayhi salam revealed this answer to the Prophet ﷺ. And that answer came in the form of the verses found in Surah Al-Kahf. So what exactly does this story talk about? It talks about a man by the name of Dhul-Qarnayn meaning the man with two horns, right? So Qarnayn, two horns, which could resemble a couple figures in history. One of them being Alexander the Great, which is largely thought of, but only Allah knows best who this leader was. Another being Cyrus, the king of Persia, which a lot of scholars actually think this man was. But in the Quran, Allah and who he was really doesn't matter to us. It's essentially what the lessons from this story are that truly affect our lives. So in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, they ask you concerning Dhul Qarnayn, say, I will rehearse to you some of his story. Some of his story. Not all of his story. That's the first important point. That this man did a lot of things. He did a lot of great things. But Allah is only revealing some of his story. Just like the story of Musa alayhi salam, you'll note that when Musa alayhi salam was raised in Fir'aun's palace, you don't hear too much about him being raised in Fir'aun's palace, right? Very brief verses, nothing too in depth. No hadith that explains too in depth what happened during that time. However, after the Prophet Musa alayhi salam, received revelation and he spoke with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and he led Bani Israel away from Fir'aun, you start to see that this content becomes more concentrated, right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chooses to show which portions of these historic iconic figures in Islam, which portions of their lives are relevant to us and throughout the course of our life that will help us get to Jannah, inshallah. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that we'll recite some of his story, not the full story. We delegate, we do not explain more than we know. Allah also says this in another part of the Quran. So it just so happened that Dhul Qarnayn he was traveling, and it says that he reached the setting of the sun. Dhul Qarnayn was given the opportunity to punish or honor those who believed or disbelieved. Now, this was not the famous story with Ya'juj and Ma'juj, but he was somewhere in between, okay? And when he got to these first people, some of them, they disbelieved, and some of them, they believed. And Dhul Qarnayn was very simple in how he regarded his judgment. Now, note that there were some qualities of Dhul Qarnayn that are very important. Among them being that first and foremost, he was a pious individual. He knew that he was a Muslim, he was a man who feared God before he was a king, and that anything that he had was attributed to only what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allowed him to have. And you see, the fact of the matter is, this is a direct comparison you can make with some of the leaders that we see today, in that a lot of the times many of these leaders act upon their own personal accord without any accountability from a higher creator. Dhul Qarnayn was the one who prayed when Allah asked him to pray. He gave zakat when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asked him to give zakat. He knew that his leadership, his power, was only a means that was given to him by Allah, and it could easily be taken as quickly as it was given. So instead of overpowering these people, he understood that, hey, look, if you are going to be disobedient, then there's a punishment waiting for you. And if you are going to act in, graciousness and in piety, then there's good waiting for you. And the ones who are going to be punished, not only are they going to be punished in this life, they're going to be punished in the next. So he was very fair and he was very clear. As Dhul-Qarnayn made his journey, he comes across a people that they, it says the description is given as far as the horizon can see. And some scholars have mentioned from reputable sources that when Dhul-Qarnayn got to this area, he required at least 200 translators to translate from him and to the people who are native to that land. And so they, one by one, imagine how hard that is to translate between an individual and 200 people in between that individual. You would think that the word would get lost, but in this case, that word stayed pretty consistent. And what Dhul Qarnayn realized was that these people were being persecuted by tribes named Yagog and Magog in Arabic. They are known as Ya'juj and Ma'juj. And these tribes were being very vicious to the people. They were endangering the safety and the well-being of these native people in the land. And so they asked Dhul Qarnayn, they asked him, can you please assist us in helping us, keep us safeguarded from these people? And so Dhul Qarnayn responds, and he responds by saying that we will erect a wall between you and between these people. However, when we erect this wall, and I'm summarizing, you will have to contribute in making this wall an engineering feat, right? So not only do I want to do it, not only will I do it for you, but you will have to help me do it. Now that's very important for a couple reasons. Number one is that a leader demonstrates by example, right? It's a cooperative effort, meaning if a leader has a responsibility to do something, he must act in cohesion with those who are willing to be helped. The ones who are seeking help, he must act in cohesion with. Look at all the social reform that is in need today. The leadership that we have in this country, unfortunately, they act out of special interest and not in the interest of the people. A true solution to the problem, as demonstrated in the Quran, is that a joint effort must be made with the leader and his congregation and his constituents in order to achieve a common goal. The leader must be willing to listen, and the constituents must be willing to cooperate. It reminds me of a quote that JFK said, and not that saying JFK is a great leader or anything, but it was interesting what he said back, I believe, in the 60s or the 50s, where they were somebody had asked him, there's this problem in the country, there's this problem in the country. What are you doing for our country? One of the citizens asked him this question, and JFK responded by saying, it is not what I do for your country. It is what you can do for your country. What can you do for this country that has provided so many benefits for you? How are you willing to make this country a better place? We can look at this in the same context of our masjids, right? Many times we go to Jum'ah, many times we attend Friday night programs, many times we only see the masjid for once a week, and I know during COVID it's a little harder, but pre-COVID and inshallah after COVID, our involvement with the masjid shouldn't be limited to one Jum'ah per week. And if we have anything to say about how the masjid is run, maybe instead of asking what the masjid can do for us, we should be asking ourselves, what can I do for the masjid? What skills, what attributes do I have that can be contributed to the well-being and the overall well-being of the longevity of this masjid, of this center, and the goals it seeks to accomplish in the next 10, 20, 50 years. So that's number one. And also in these verses, it explains, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala explains how Dhul Qarnayn, not only did he ask these people to come and have a joint cooperative effort, but he himself was, the one who kind of put the icing on the cake. Meaning he was the one himself who solidified that wall through, industrial engineering. And a quick point here is that, alhamdulillah, we have many examples and icons in the Quran in the history of Islam that pioneered certain aspects of knowledge that we would not have known had these individuals pioneered that. For example, Adam alayhi salam, his ability of linguistics, the ability to know speech, to know what to say, when to say it, how to say it. This is when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala taught him, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him the ability to have speech, to know what to say to people, to know how to name things. We wouldn't know the name of a water bottle that we're drinking from. When Adam alayhi salam told, the names of the angels to themselves, who themselves, they didn't know their own name, they were in shock. Because for all these years, Allah had never told them their name. They had a name, but they did not know it. And Adam alayhi salam revealed this name to them. So, we have linguistics from Adam alayhi salam. From Nuh, for example, we have navigation, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded Nuh to build this huge ark that would sustain him through this calamity that was about to befall him and his people. So the arts of navigation, without these arts of navigation, maybe, we would not have found the United States. Maybe Christopher Columbus, as whatever opinion, people have of him, he probably would never have found this country in the first place. So every prophet, every icon in Islamic history had something to benefit the future generation in terms of knowledge. And we see here in the story of Dhul-Qarnayn that his engineering prowess was inevitably something of great nature that paved the way for many engineers for technology to occur in the future. A lot of the times we look at this world and we see, different engineering feats that happened many, many years ago, thousands of years ago, and we don't even know how that even occurred. How could human beings at those times have the engineering capacity and labor to construct some of these things where it would require some work to even do it today? But at those times, they didn't have machinery, they didn't have tools. How did it happen? So, alhamdulillah, there are some verses in the Quran that allow for this phenomena. And the last point I'll mention is that to be a leader, you must be willing to demonstrate by action. You must be willing to demonstrate by action. And there are many points that can be tied into this. Among them being that if you think that you're not a leader in your workplace, if you think that you're not a leader in your home, if you think that you're not a leader in the masjid, if you're not a leader anywhere, then for sure, because you are a Muslim, you by default are a leader in society. By default, it is your mannerisms, it is your speech, it is your actions that are going to be put under a microscopic lens by the rest of society. And society is going to view you and see and ask you, are you really emulating what Islam teaches? Or are you one of those individuals when somebody asks you a question, a non-Muslim asks you a question about Islam, you defer to somebody else and you say, well, I don't really know the answer to that. I'm not sure. You go find it somewhere else. Or you give them a wrong response, right? There is so much opportunity for outreach in da'wah in the capacity of you being a leader that we must be able to recognize that if somebody were to ask us a question, we must be a leader when we engage in that response. We must say, hey, Brian, Todd, whoever you are, if you are asking me, why do Muslims pray 5 times a day? Number one, I want to be demonstrating that through my actions. And number two, there is a significance behind why we pray. They wouldn't be asking you why you pray if they didn't see you praying in the first place. So many points to tie in this topic. But, inshallah, this is all I have for today. So if there are any questions, I think Brother Farid, you had something as well.
So at first I wanted to say Jazakallahu khairan to Brother Bilal for that wonderful talk. I honestly, personally couldn't be more happier that he chose a topic such as leadership to talk about because it goes along with what I have to announce as well. So first and foremost, thank you again to Brother Bilal for that wonderful talk. And so the announcement that I had to make, and I really think it falls in accordance to what he was mentioning earlier, was I wanted to announce that we are trying to start or in the process of planning a brand new mentorship program through ICSB. And so let's kind of talk about, I think for a few minutes here, the process of what it is we're trying to do with this. So first and foremost, why is it that we're doing a mentorship program and what is the value of mentorship? And as Brother Bilal mentioned, and we're trying to create leaders in the community. We're trying to create those who will carry on the torch of Islam into the future. And these will be our next generation of leaders as well. And in regards to that, one of the biggest things that we noticed that has a big influence on how a student develops is really his education system. And so I hope everyone was able to see, inshallah, that we sent a flyer out not too long ago with a virtual workshop titled Redefining Higher Education. And this primarily refers to college education and post-college education as well. So I really wanted to encourage everybody to please sign up for it. I will be leading it along with Brother Safir, and we are trying to cover a lot of different topics. For the students who are attending, it will be about finances on Brother Safir's end, and from my end, it will be about the mentorship program in general. And the value of mentorship in a lot of cases in education is because you will ultimately, as a student, if there are students who are viewing this right now or parents of students, you will ultimately look towards someone for guidance, someone to help you, sure, maybe through school, but just in life in general. And this was the same case for me. Let me take a moment to introduce myself as well, for those of you who don't know. My name is Farid Rahman. I just graduated from the University of California, Riverside this past June. If anybody wants a little extra detail, I'm also Sister Gulnaz's oldest son, if that helps at all. But one of the things I learned coming out of college and through college as well was looking up towards upperclassmen for advice moving into the future, picking a career. And as valuable as this is, how surface level is this advice, or how valuable is it for us as Muslims? We will always have these mentors to look towards in education, in our schools, whether it's high school, college, and hereafter. But how many of them can we say are our Muslim mentors? And this is where it becomes the most important to really mention, that we need people to give back to the youth of our community, to take up a stand now that we're coming out of college, now that we're going into our young adulthood, and to really mentor these students throughout their education as well. Teach them how to be a proper Muslim and a leader nonetheless throughout their education. And so I very much encourage everybody to please reach out if there are students here. I very much encourage you to attend our virtual workshop. And if there are parents, if you have students who are looking to attend, please tell them about it as well. I think it'll be very informational. And Jazakallahu khairan to everybody who is listening. I think if we have a few minutes, we can do questions for both either me about the mentorship program or the workshop, or for our brother Bilal as well.
Assalamu alaikum, brother Bilal. Can you? Assalamu alaikum, brother Bilal. Can hear. Read it again. Yeah, can hear you.
Walaikum salam. Sorry, I muted myself.
Assalamu alaikum, brother. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
I have a question. Can you list the qualities or the qualification of a Muslim leader, please?
I mean, I'm sure there are a lot, and there's not one defined list, but I would assume that among them are sincerity, being sincere in your actions, and understanding that Allah is watching you at all times, regardless of what you do, and you will be accountable for whatever you do in this life. Humbleness, devotion, determination, and charisma. Being a leader means that you must be able to communicate well with others. Communication is paramount when leadership is in question. So these are a few, but I would say number one is submissiveness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because without understanding that Allah is supreme, your leadership is really not worthy.
Right. Jazakallah khair, brother.
Did anyone else have any more questions?
Well, thank you, Bilal. There are no more questions, inshallah. I think we can call it a night, inshallah. I really like the program that you brought out, and inshallah it does well for your community. Let me know if you need any help. I think I was in a conversation with Sister Jabeen regarding this. Maybe we can touch base later and talk a little more, inshallah.
Jazakallah khair. I appreciate it. So if there are no further questions, I think I will turn it to the moderator. One thing I did want to be very, very that I actually just got a text message from a close friend of mine. One of his relatives, Dr. Iqbal in Maryland, recently caught COVID from one of his patients, and he's going through a lot of trouble right now. Can I please ask the community to keep him in your du'as, inshallah, and may Allah give him a speedy recovery, inshallah. Yes, thank you for everybody who joined for today's Friday night program. Please feel free to reach out to any of us if there are any questions, and definitely contact us and reach out to ICSB for more questions about the program. Hope you all look forward. Jazakallahu khair.
خلاص يا جماعة. Good job. Okay. خلاص. سكر.
Mين says?
I don't know.
Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum.
Salam.
Is the program done?
Everything is done, yes.
All right, cool. Jazakallah. Thank you very much.
Mhm.